Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a former Boeing 737 pilot, and welcome to the takeoff tutorial in the iFly Boeing 737 MAX. We are standing at the holding point of runway 26 right in Las Vegas, and we have just gotten our lineup clearance by the tower controller. So let's go ahead and carry out the appropriate procedure. Once the lineup clearance is received, we are going to turn on the strobe light, so the position light into the strobe and steady position. We move down to the MCP, turn on the auto throttle arm, and LNAV and VNAV, or whichever other mode we might want to use for our takeoff. Last but not least, we go down to the transponder and set it into the TA-RA position. The pilot flying, as soon as he is going to initiate the lineup itself, will turn the landing lights on and the taxi light off unless takeoff clearance is received. So the taxi light is your reminder whether a takeoff clearance has been received. So, park and brake release. At this point we do the before takeoff checklist below the line. And now we can go ahead and line our aircraft up on the runway. The lineup is something that a lot of simulator pilots do incorrectly. There is a misconception among flight simmers that the yellow taxi line would be used for the line up on the runway. That is not the case. You do not follow that taxi line on the lineup. As you can see, it would line you up somewhere over here, which is wasting a lot of taxiway length. Much rather, you are going to make a straight 90-degree entry into the runway, and then try to use as little runway as possible for your lineup. So let's go ahead and move the aircraft into position, and what we are going to do is we basically taxi straight until the center line reaches about the bottom side of the right window, like now. And then we make a right-hand tiller input in order to align our aircraft with the center line. That way we use as little runway as possible. And here we are. So, once we are lined up on the runway, maintain the wheel brakes, but do not use the parking brake, as that might be a common mistake to trigger the takeoff config warning when the actual takeoff clearance is received. Now, before we take off, let's talk a little bit about the basic takeoff procedure. So, the basic takeoff sequence is as follows. You are going to increase the thrust to 40% N1 and let both engines stabilize there. Once the engines are stabilized, press the toga button that is located down here on the thrust levers. Small hint, you also have a toga click spot available on the MCP on the top left screw on the MCP right up here. Now, the engines are going to run up to the target takeoff thrust setting, and as soon as the thrust is set, you are going to verify that and announce takeoff thrust set, indications normal. Thrust needs to be set by 60 knots, and it is rather important that you have a look at that, because under certain conditions, in case of strong headwinds, the thrust may not be set by the time you reach 60 knots, and when the auto throttle transitions into thrust hold at 84 knots, your thrust might not be set correctly, so you might have to adjust it manually in case of very strong headwinds. At 80 knots we are going to cross-check the speed indications between the left and the right speed indicator and the standby system, and once we reach we are going to apply slight forward control column pressure, so something like this, until about 80 knots. At 80 knots, go back to neutral control column, as the rudder would have become strong enough that it can aerodynamically control the aircraft, while previously the pitch up moment of the engines is going to reduce your nose wheel steering effectiveness, which is the reason why we push down on the elevator a little bit in order to increase the nose wheel steering effectiveness to track the center line. Reaching V1, take your hands off the thrust levers, and at VR start a smooth continuous rotation between 2 and 2.5 degrees a second up to 15 degrees of pitch. The aircraft will lift off at approximately 8 degrees pitch, so you're looking at about 4 seconds until the aircraft starts lifting off. Very important, there is a common misconception amongst flight simmers that the nose needs to lift off once the rotate call is done. That is incorrect. At the rotate call, you start to initiate a smooth and continuous rotation until you start lifting off. But you do not, I repeat, not immediately force the airplane up. Some simmers just do this. Don't do that. Make it smooth and continuous. When the nose starts lifting up at about 7.5 degrees of pitch, so at the third line, the elevator is going to enter the so-called dead band. That is when the tailplane enters the turbulences created by the wing and therefore loses effectiveness. You will need to increase your pressure on the control column slightly. Say if you're at this previously, you might need to do this in order to maintain a continuous rotation rate. At 10 degrees pitch you get out of that again and you can go back to your previous control column setting. Note, in the present version of the iFly 737 MAX, this is not simulated, but I'm mentioning it because I hope that it will be in the future. Alright, once you reach 15 degrees pitch, you can start using the flight director, but do not use it beforehand. The flight director does not give you any information about the rotation. At 50 feet, your roll mode is going to come active, so LNAV will engage. At 400 feet, VNAV will engage, and then we simply need to follow the flight director. At 1000 feet, we can engage the autopilot, and from that moment on, the aircraft is going to fly on autopilot, and I will talk you through anything that comes thereafter. So, quick recap. 40% thrust, stabilize, press toga, check takeoff thrust is set by 60 knots. At 80 knots, cross-check the speed. At V1, take your hand off the thrust levers. When you hear rotate, smoothly start pulling back. Don't just yank the control column back like some simmers tend to do. Smoothly rotate it to 15 degrees pitch. And once you're in the air, you can make use of the flight director. Once you achieve 15 degrees pitch, with a positive rate, retract the gear. And at 1000 feet, we are going to engage the autopilot. Alright, sounds easy? Well, let's give it a go. So, United 2356, 26 right, clear takeoff. Taxi light on. Takeoff. 40% stabilized. Press toga. And now we can also start the timer. So, forward control column pressure to increase our nose wheel steering effectiveness. Thrust is set. And the speed starts coming alive. So, approaching 80 knots, control column back to neutral, 80 knots, speed cross-checked. Ignore that plane over there. Okay, have a look at the control column. Rotate. Smoothly and steadily. Slow rotation rate. Positive climb. Gear up. So, LNAV has captured. 400 feet. VNAV has captured. And now we can fly it right into the flight directors. At 1000 feet, which is the top of the white bar over here, we can go ahead and engage the autopilot, like now. Verify CMD shows. And now the aircraft is going to start the acceleration. Once you're above the V2 plus 15 buck over here and the positive trend vector shows, we can go ahead and retract our flaps. So we're in the flaps 5 position right now. Let's retract them into the 1 position. So flaps 1. And here we have flaps 1. And passing the 1 buck with the positive trend vector, retract the flaps towards the up position. When you're retracting the flaps, make sure that the target speed is not below the buck for the next flap setting. So make sure that you always accelerate above the newly selected flap setting. Alright, so flaps up, no lights is indicated. Now we can run the after takeoff procedure. Starting on the overhead panel, taxi light off, engine start switches off unless needed for engine anti-ice. So when engine anti-ice is on, you're going to keep those in continuous. Do not make the mistake and try to move the landing gear lever into an off position. There is no off position on the 737 MAX. Don't do that. Otherwise the landing gear is going to extend. And last but not least, the auto brake goes into the off position. Finally, we verify the configuration of the air condition and pressurization system by checking that the bleeds are on, APU bleed off, PAX auto, isolation valve auto. And when all of that is done, we can run the after takeoff checklist. So that's engine bleeds on, PAX, auto, landing gear, up, and flaps up, no light. After takeoff checklist complete. So, thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope you found this one interesting. Be sure to leave your feedback in the video description below. Like, comment and subscribe, and if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.